Right, welcome to week 5 um, of My Choose Coding Squads. I'll just wait a minute to see if anyone. Okay, 5 minutes in now, so I think we'll begin. Right, so this week we're going to continue on from where we were last week. So we're going to continue with the guess the random number game. So if you weren't here last week, don't worry, and if you haven't seen any of the previous sessions, don't worry, they're all available on demand. So we'll just go over what we covered last week and then talk about how we're going to take those tasks further as well. So we'll be continuing to use random numbers and continue looking at like how we plan our code as well. And then later on in the lesson, we'll look at another task, look at breaking that down into steps, and then hopefully you should be able to have a go at that in your own time to try and implement that, and then we can go over that next week. Okay. All right. Okay, so last week we had this specification, and essentially this game was a standard guess the number game. It would randomly generate a number between 1 and 100, which we can see here, and you could have so many guesses to guess the number, and you get more points depending on how many guesses you took. So we can see here that we take 25 tokens off the total every time. Total starts at 100, and then we add 100 divided by the number of guesses to the total each at the end. So if you have one guess, you're going to get 100 points. If you have two guesses, you're going to get 50 points, and so on and so on. So it awards how quickly you guess the number. So we broke this down into a few different versions, and we completed version 1 and version 2. So version 1 was just generating a number, have a guess. If it's higher, we output higher. If it's lower, we output lower. We can see we've got that there. And then it continues until the number is guessed correctly, which would be here, where we print equal and correctly set to true. So we then had version 2, where we took this further and we added a point system, which we can see here, that I've already talked about, with total. And we also wanted to allow for multiple games to take place, and this is where that while loop comes in. So we basically said while correct was equal to false. And we would keep doing this, so that, yeah, that works for the guessing the number. But then this outer loop is for having multiple games. So while true essentially means keep doing this forever. So you might be wondering, how does this ever end? And that's through this break keyword. So we have this choice down here that says, do you want to continue, yes or no? And if the choice equals no, then we print you finish with this total, and we break. And the loop ends. Yeah. Okay, and then we now want to look at version 3. By the way, I forgot to mention at the start, but if anyone has any questions about anything that we're going through, any general coding questions they'd like answering, put them in the chat. Any general questions I'll probably leave to the Q&A session, Q&A part of the session, 15 minutes from the end. Anything specific with the session, I'll just answer when I see it. So I'm sort of looking periodically at the chat. So it might take me a few minutes before I see your message, but I'll try and address them as quickly as possible. Okay, so version 3 then is having multiple levels. So this is the final version you need to implement. So we set up here that level 1 was, say, you get 100 points for one guess, 50 points for 2 guesses, 25 for 3 guesses. Level 2, you get 200 points for one guess, 100 points for 2 guesses, etc., etc. And it's also good to specify, I think I said up here, each level increases the range of numbers that the number could be by a factor of 2. So level 1 will be 1 to 100. Level 2 will be 1 to 200. And level 3 will be 1 to 400. And we could even have infinite levels if we wanted to, but it would potentially get very, very difficult as you increase to a ridiculous number. So essentially you get to level 3 and you have 1 to 400. This is as high as we'll go for now. And you get 400 points for one guess, 200 points for 2 guesses, 100 points for 3, and so on and so on. So, okay. So what we need to add here is we need to ask the user what level they want to choose. So first thing, we need to put that down here. So we need to ask that. Okay. And then we've got 2 things that differ in each level: the number of points and the range of numbers. So therefore, depending on what level is chosen by the user, the points will start at a certain number, and the upper range of the random numbers will be a certain number. Okay. So I've said depending on this level. So what type of statement are we going to use here? Does anyone know? So it's the statement we use whenever we're checking that something has a certain value or is satisfies a certain condition. Okay, I'll give another 10-15 seconds. Okay, so the statement we want to use here is an if statement. So we basically say if this condition is true, then do this. And you can have else if this condition is true, then you do this. And you can also have an else as well, where if none of the previous conditions are true, you do this one. Okay. So we have this if statement, and then we have points being set to a certain number and the upper limit being set to a certain number. So we have two variables here, the start of points and the upper range of the random numbers. Okay. So this is basically going to be a block of if statements and setting certain values to these two variables. So the syntax will look like this. We have if, and then we'll have our statement. I'll just leave that there. And then if this, what, do we already have a variable for this? No, we don't. We just have it explicitly declared as 100. So we're going to need to change that and create a new variable. And yeah, let's do points. So points, we need to declare it outside of the loop, outside the if statement first. Let's just start it at 100. Now the reason we need to declare it up here is that, and we'll probably see this later on, is that the compiler or the interpreter needs to know that points has already been declared. So if you only declare it in these if statements, it doesn't know when it gets down to here if points has been initialized, because it depends on these conditions. It wants to know that it has always been initialized. So you don't end up with a problem where you have points not existing. And if you were to use that, it would cause your program to crash. So therefore, you always want to set it as a value before you give it a certain value based on a condition. And if anyone wants me to explain that in more detail, I'm happy to do so. Just put it in the chat. Okay. So we also have the upper limit as well. So let's set upper as 100. Okay. Okay. So we're going to have three different scenarios. We're going to have level 1. We're going to have level 2. And then else can be level 3. Or we could even take this a step further and add some validation. So if we say this is level 3, and then else is when we have an invalid level. Or so basically a level that doesn't exist. They've chosen level 0, level -10, or level 10 or something. It doesn't exist, so they can't choose it. So on level 1, I'm going to set points to 100, and we're going to set upper also to 100. So we don't strictly need this, but just for readability purposes, to make it nice and clear what we're doing, let's leave it in for now. So on level 2, we're going to set points to be 200. So we're just following the rules here, just basically stating what the rules say. There's nothing that we need to think about. Just what it says. Okay. Now we need to think about what these conditions are. And we know that we need an input from the user about what level they want to play. So we're going to get this input before these if statements. So if you recall, an input looks like this. We have the variable we're storing it in on the left hand side, and then it equals, and then input, and inside this input we have a string, which is our prompt, basically. So we have enter the level you want to play. And remember that we're expecting an integer here, so we need to specify that. So it'll be an int. Okay. And instead of variable name, we want to use something specific, so we'll just call this level. Okay. And simply, we just say if level equals 1, if level equals 2, so elif level equals 2, and elif level equals 3. And then else. So what would we maybe want to do if they enter something other than 1, 2, or 3? Any ideas? So if you're playing this game, and yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah. So for level 1, level 2, level 3, it sets points, sets up as that's valid. And yet if we want to, we could print that's a valid level. We could do that, but what if it's an invalid level? What would we do there? Because we couldn't set points and uppers to something. So in this case, we want the user to be aware that they've entered a level that isn't valid, and then we want to get them to enter a new level. Anyone have any idea how we would do that exactly? Because there's a bit more to this. So we can have a print statement here to print an error message. But then we want to then get them to enter a yes, we need a while loop, yes. What could that condition be? Any ideas? So think about how we can tell when the user has entered a valid level and when they haven't. Yeah, okay, you've got the right idea. So it's not 100, 200, and 400, it's level 1, 2, or 3. That's just what we set the points and the upper value to. So if we use your solution, we could say level does not equal 1, and level does not equal 2, and level does not equal 3. And that would work. However, if we add more levels, this is going to get quite complicated. And you also see here that level isn't defined, so we have an issue there as well. Now, what might be a better way is to add this break keyword. So we talked about this earlier here. So when the user makes a choice about where to continue, if they say no, then we break out of the game loop. We're doing the same thing here. When they enter a valid level, we break out of this loop that keeps asking them for a level. So we can just replace this with while true, get the level, and then this will continue until they enter a valid level. Same thing applies as we said here. Points and upper needs to be defined before the if statements. Level needs to be defined before the while loop too, so that the compiler, so that the interpreter knows that level exists regardless. So we'll just set it to 0, but it will be overwritten, so that's fine. Yeah, and yeah, that's a good idea, Mohammed. So if we print here, so if we just add a bit to it, the level you entered is invalid, enter another number. Or like try again or something. You could even go as far as saying how many levels there are. We'll keep it simple for now. Okay. So one thing I've done here so far that's redundant. Can anyone spot it? Any code that we could just remove here? So think about any repetition we have in this code. Can you spot any at all? So we don't want to break in the else condition because we want to keep asking them to enter a level until it's valid. So that's not an issue. And this code will work fine, but there's just something that's a bit unnecessary in it. So think about as the levels increases, what's happening to points and upper? Yeah, they're going to have the same value because we're just doubling it every time. So you may as well just have one variable for both. So if we just call this, if we call this like level value or something, let's just call it value for now. Might think of a better name later. We can just have one variable for both. Value equals 100, value equals 200. Value equals 300. 400, I mean. Okay. And we could even take this a step further, potentially. Now, if we follow these precise rules, we could have infinite levels. So what we need to do here is we need to generalize this code. So instead of having like if level equals 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, etc., it would get very, very, very long. We could just have a simple value equals something. And we still need some validation because we're not going to have negative levels. That wouldn't really make any sense. So we could just have that quite simply by if level is less than 1, then print level is invalid. But then else, if the level is valid, then we set the value to a certain thing and we break. So now this is something a bit new. I haven't really looked at this in Python with you all. This specific piece of syntax, but we've got it increasing by 2 every time. So we just need to write a line of code that will work for all levels. So yeah, this might be a bit of a tricky thing. So I think I'll just have to say what you do here. But it's just to give you an example of how you generalize it. So basically, you've got 1 for level here, then you've got 100 here, 2 for level here, and 200, 3 for level here, 400. Essentially, it's going up by powers of 2, which increases by 1 every time because the level increases by 1 every time. So the two things are linked. So essentially what we can write this as, that the value at level 1, now this code isn't quite correct, but I'll just write in the maths here. It starts at 100 times 2 to the 0, which is 100 times 1, essentially. Level 2 is 100 times 2 to the 1. Level 3 is 100 times 2 to the 2. And then level 4 would be 100 times 2 to the 3. Does anyone know how to do powers in Python? And don't worry if you don't. Yes, exactly, yeah. You said about why not less than 100. Okay, right. So you could even say, could even start your like upper limit at 10 or something. So you could go less than 100, yeah. But it wouldn't be a very long game if you just have a range of 10. So that's why I've started at 100 to give a bit of difficulty to it. But yeah, you're all right. It's 2 asterisks. So we're going to have multiply by and then 2 to the 0. Let me just put brackets around this just to make sure it's going to be right. So, and we just need to write this code. So we're going to have 100. It's always 100. And you could even, like you said, if you want to, let's have like starting as 100, and we can change this if we desire to. So we'll have starting times 2 to the 2 to the level minus 1. This is the great thing as well. So we just have this line of code, nice and simple. And we could add more variables here. We could say, okay, I don't want it to each level to double every time. So let's have, what haven't I used? Have I used increase? Yeah, okay. Let's have, increase rate. We could set this to 2, and then we could modify it if we want. So this is a useful tip. As much as possible, don't have explicit numbers if they mean something. So try and declare like these constants of like starting and increase rate, because when someone reads your code, they can then see, okay, this is what that value means, this is what that value means. If you declare them just explicitly with no context, I don't know why you've chosen 2, I don't know why you've chosen 100. So it's quite useful to write it like this. Okay, so I mean, you asked about how many levels you have. You could have as many as you want now. So yeah, you could introduce an upper limit, but if you didn't want to, you could just say have as many as the maximum value of an integer. So yeah, if we wanted to, we could introduce an upper limit, or we could just have it completely uncapped and infinite levels, up until the maximum value of an integer anyway. Yeah. So if we get rid of this, and I'll leave this code commented out. I'll put in the description as well, if you don't have access to this already, the link to this, to all this code, and you can have a look at it yourself as well. So yeah, okay, what do we have left to do now? So we've inputted the level, we've checked that it's valid, we've created this value, and now we've finished this loop. So let's go back to our plan. And so we've done this, we've done this. So we've now got the point starting at a certain number, the upper range, the random numbers will be a certain number. And we need to now integrate this with our previous code. By the way, I think we're just into the Q&A part now, so if you have any questions, general questions, put them in the chat. Yeah, in terms of making it shorter, I mean, let's bring it all together, and we'll see what happens now. So let's just copy and paste this. Okay, so where's this go? So we want to do this at the very start. So let's put this in the while true loop. And yeah, it was there. Put a bit of spacing in this as well. Okay. Now let's move our constants and level as well outside of this, because they shouldn't really be defined every time the loop starts. Okay. So in our while true loop, we have this loop that gets the level, and it gets the value we need. And then let's just replace these constants. Instead of 1 to 100, we have 1 to value. Instead of total minus 25, yeah, let's probably still have total minus 25, but we should have a variable for that. So let's call it cost of gain. So now you can see what that means. You're not confused about why are we taking 25 over the time. Okay, so then we have total less than 0. You've run out of points. And let's go to this part. And yeah, the only thing we need to change here is this 100. And we put value here. So that is the starting number of points. Divided by the number of guesses, that gives us the total. And this should now work, and we should have any number of levels. So there will be something wrong with this. So let's run this. Let's just start level 1, just to make sure it works. 50, too low. 70, too low. 90, too high. 80, too high. 75, too low. 7 equal. Let's continue, and we should also print out the number of points as well. So print, you have remember we need to convert to a string as it's an integer and we're printing it. You have this many points. Okay. Stops again. And again. So we're going to do level 2 this time. And we should have between 1 and 200. So now you can see it's generated a number greater than 100. It's too low, 137. Too high, 131. Too low, 134. Too low, 135. Equal, yeah. And you can see now so we took how many guesses? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 guesses. So we started on 200 possible points. So we did 200 divided by 7. Took off 25 because that's the cost of the game. We started on 100. So therefore we must have got about 28 points. So 28, that's about right, yeah. 200 divided by 7 is about 28.5-ish, yeah. Okay. Okay. Now we should also probably round this up because it's not a very nice number, but yeah. Okay. So I see how you've written it using functions. So you've got play game. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So absolutely, you can feel free to break this down into functions a bit. I mean, in terms of repeated codes we have in here, I don't think there's much. So you don't need to do it with functions. I mean, you could have a function for the game part, which returns the number of guesses you took. You could have this as a function to get the level. It won't really save you writing any code, but it might make it a bit nicer to read. You can see it's sort of split up more. So absolutely you can do that. And make sure as well you add some comments to this. I mean, I've added a few, but we do need to add a few more comments to this. Yeah. Okay, we've got about, so we started at 35 past, so we've got just under 10 minutes left. So does anyone have any general questions, any more questions about anything we've gone through today at all? If not, I will introduce the task we're going to move on to next. So this next task is quite similar to what we've just done, probably a bit simpler. Let's just create a new Python file. Let's call it once again. Yeah, okay, should be Python automatically. Yeah, might just have to change this to Python. Okay. Okay, let's leave this now. Right. Anyway, so we're just going to go through the specification for this game. So the rules of this are that we're going to ask 10 basic numeracy questions. Each question consists of 2 random numbers, as well as either a plus, multiply, or divide sign. Yeah, so it should be an asterisk in Python. So just to give you examples, we could have 5 plus 5, 6 times 7. Yeah, that shouldn't be divide, and then when I said that, it should be subtract. We're not doing divide because you can get very horrible numbers as answers, so it wouldn't be very fair. So this game should be aimed at sort of 6-7-year-olds, that sort of age, in terms of playing it. So you'd have these sort of questions, fairly basic numeracy questions. Now, the user should be able to input their answer, then either correct or incorrect is printed, and at the end of the game, their score out of 10 is printed. And these random numbers, I should say, are between 1 and 10. Although if you want to extend this, like we've seen in the random number guesser game, you could increase the range of random numbers, change that to like 1 in the hundreds, change it to 1 in the thousand. If you want to make it a bit harder, so you could do that depending on what the level the user asked for. And so a few other extension tasks that I might give next week. Yeah, so what I want you to think about is don't just go straight into how do I code this. Think about what are the particular steps that we need. So we need to create the question, get the answer, check if it's correct, and then I'll leave this blank, what you do if it's correct, and then what you do if it's incorrect. So you need to think about that. I'm not going to fill in that. I want to give some stuff to think about. And then at the end, print the score at the end. So think about what programming structure are we going to, or construct, are we going to use to ask 10 questions. So think about that. So you need to sort of break it down into all these individual steps, go into it in a bit more detail. So how are you creating the question, because that's a few lines of code. How are you calculating the answer, and then how are you checking if it's correct? What does that if statement look like? And then what do you do if it's correct or incorrect? Yeah. So that should have given you a bit of a start with it. So I think it'd be good if you can all use Replit, or you can use whatever code editor you usually use, to have a go at that before next lesson. Oh yeah, so you said about doing GCSE exam questions. I don't know how many people who watch this are GCSE students. I don't really know the age group of the people watching it. I mean, I could go through some GCSE pseudocode questions potentially, but I just kind of wanted to make it a more general coding course. I think that's the idea of the sessions, but potentially if there's the demand for that. Yes, yeah. So yeah, just to clarify, this should be randomized as well. So I think that's quite a tricky part actually. Think about how you can randomly choose one of these symbols. Okay. Any more questions at all? We got a couple of minutes left. So any questions about this task, any questions about the work we've been doing this lesson on the guess the number game, or any general coding questions? So, yeah, just while I'm waiting for questions, we will be back again same time next Friday at 5:30. So we've got 3 weeks left, I think. So we'll go over sort of a solution to this game. Hopefully you all will have a chance to go through it beforehand, see how far you get. Don't worry if you're struggling with it a bit. We'll go through it in full. So look at planning it, look at them writing a solution for it, and we can all discuss how we got on, discuss any issues we had. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So just to clarify, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine, Mohammed. You're giving people a head start a bit. So I want everyone to have a go at this by themselves, see how much they've sort of taken from the sessions. But feel free to look at the stuff we've done in this session and the previous ones as well. But yeah, that looks good so far. So yeah, if everyone could have a go at this before next lesson, that would be great. And then any questions, anything, so we can go through next lesson. All right. Thanks, everyone. I will see you next Friday.